Welcome back to the DigiGods Podcast. A little longer intro than normal there for the ball and chain music. We have a little unusual show this week. We have a new co-host for a couple of weeks, Nadim George.
Hello, hello, hello.
Nadim has been a guest on the show before. You were on, a few months ago, right? When I did a show with Tim.
Correct.
You sat in on a show, yeah. So the Ides of August and vacations and everything else have taken a little toll on our usual operational procedures. Mark, at the drop of a hat, I guess as everybody knows on the show, Mark has a long-distance romance that extends from Los Angeles to Paris, and he, at the drop of a hat, decided that he was going to head to Paris for a week and a half. So yesterday, Mark hopped a plane, and he is off in Paris for the next week and a half. So we are without Mark. And Tim would normally have sat in with us, but Tim has been on a grand family tour across the United States that's going to wind up back in his native St. Louis on the day of the eclipse. So Tim will be seeing 95% of the eclipse in St. Louis. So Tim is not with us either. I think he might be in Milwaukee today. So Nadim, thank you for being here.
Well, you know, your listeners could actually turn off the lights and listen to this podcast and assume they were under the eclipse. And are you suggesting that I take no vacation, so I'm available in August?
You're pretty much here. You're around. You're easy to grab. So, but thank you for being here. For those who don't know, Nadim is a filmmaker. So please, by all means, chime in with any more professional observations on any of this stuff. Next week you'll be here as well, and we have television next week. There's some interesting TV, and I know you worked extensively in television for many years.
Yes, I have.
So we will have fun then as well. So we've got Nadim with us for a couple of weeks. We also have an interview today. I did an interview this week with my very first film school instructor, who has a new feature film out. And Terry Sanders, Oscar-winning filmmaker who started in short films and then became a very successful documentary filmmaker. And Terry is amazing and just recently did a feature narrative film again, and I talked to him about it, had a great conversation. Liza, Skies Are Gray is the film, and so we'll have that later in the show, my interview with Terry Sanders. And meanwhile, Nadim, I'm going to give you a little bit of a breather, and I'm going to do what Mark often mocks me for doing, is I'm going to roll through some anime. So, and you know, I watch as much of this as I possibly can to get a vibe for it. The thing with anime is that, by and large, these are long-running shows, long-running series. You have to be part of the world from the very, very beginning. If you haven't been, it's kind of like jumping into deep water. So I'll try to give you a taste of some of these things, and if you think it's something that might suit your fancy for anime fans, by all means weigh in, please. Throw off any suggestions or offer any insights at godsdigigods.com that I might be missing. First is Bakuon, the complete collection. Bakuon is another one of those. You know, Nadim, how schooled are you in anime?
Not very. I'm familiar with Japanese anime and Japanese culture quite a bit, but as far as specific animes,
it's unbelievable.
But it's crazy stuff.
It's unbelievable how much of it takes place in high schools.
Yeah.
It really is. It's amazing to me. Just when you think you've seen it all, there's like another thing. I don't know if adults watch this, if kids watch this, but anyway. Bakuon is another one of these high school set things, you know, with the girls in the uniforms and the kids and their politics and all that
Is
stuff.
there a Bakuon 2?
This
Bak2?
is 12 episodes.
Bakuon?
Right. Yeah, there you go. You got me. Bakuon, and there are 2 exclamation points at the end of Bakuon. That's the title, Bakuon, 2 exclamation points. Anyway, this is about an all-girls school there's also a motorcycle club. And everything is all very kind of motorcycle fetishistic, and that's it. You know, it's coming of age in a Japanese girls' school with motorcycles. Not the greatest animation, but it's not bad either. I'm assuming that there's something cultural there that I'm completely missing. Here's something that's really pretty tremendous. Code, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Geass, Geass. Akito the Exiled. This is a Blu-ray and DVD combo set from Funimation. Pretty impressive set. This is really a really nice box set and an incredibly well animated show. The world here, and this is a limited series as I understand it. This is not an ongoing series, but this is kind of a one-off. So the world here is one of these sort of mecha fantasy worlds, and it's a little bit medieval. It's a little bit Lord of the Ringsy, and it's a fairly complicated mythology, but it's an absolutely dazzling animation. The artwork is just really, really impressive. It borrows on the very, very angular features that a lot of anime has, but my goodness, it reminded me a little bit. It's got a little bit of Ninja Scroll in it, but it's very, very impressive. Really, really good. So that is called Code Geass, Geass. Akito the Exiled from Funimation. Very, very impressive.
Most of Japanese anime is incredible animation.
Yeah.
It's a subject matter that's often quite
inaccessible
out there.
Yeah.
But you know, they're very popular in Korea. They're very popular in China. They're very popular outside of Japan as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was quoted actually years ago for what's basically a Chinese version of anime. Choi Hak, the Vietnamese-born but Hong Kong industry-educated Wayne producer, writer, director, legendary. You know, produced all of John Woo's early stuff and directed things like Better Tomorrow 3 and The Blade, many other amazing films. And of course, came here and did Van Damme films like everybody else. But he produced an animated version of Chinese Ghost Story many years ago, which came out on DVD, and I had reviewed it at a festival somewhere, and I was quoted on that box until it went out of print, and now no one cares anymore. But it was a Hong Kong film, but it was anime. You know, it was Chinese version of anime. It was really quite impressive. And then speaking of more medieval stuff, this is straight up, this is DVD only, not Blu-ray, but this is straight up medieval stuff, Samurai Warriors. And this is also from Funimation. I don't know why it's not on Blu-ray. It kind of should be. It's based in a video game series called Samurai Warriors, which I'm not familiar with. But it's really, really, really well done as well. Look, I'm a sucker for anything that's feudal Japan. It takes its liberties with the aesthetics of it and kind of invents its own medieval look and style. And I guarantee the samurais here, what they're wearing isn't like anything that any samurais ever wore in any of the actual feudal periods of Japan. But doesn't matter. It's a lot of fun. It's well designed. It's well animated. It's got great music, by the way, really, really terrific music. And it's a really interesting kind of brothers separated between a conflict thing. You know, we see that a lot, two brothers or two literal brothers or two brothers from the Shaolin Temple or two brothers that came up, adopted into the same family, and one winds up being a criminal and the other one winds up being a sheriff and that whole thing. And you got a similar deal here, divided brothers, divided loyalties. But it's really nicely done. Anything samurai is super cool. Origin, Spirits of the Past, is also a Funimation Blu-ray. This is much more delicate material, kind of Grave of the Fireflies style animation, delicate lines, beautifully animated, just the same. And this is kind of getting into a. I had to always make Lord of the Rings the analogy, but this is sort of Middle Earthian. It's not Lord of the Rings in terms of the myth, but in kind of the idea of a Middle Earth, some kind of mythical past that preceded our current existence, and it's kind of an ecological message going on here. It reminded me a little bit of Princess Mononoke in that respect, but very enjoyable, very nicely animated. And then we have also from Funimation, Outlaw Star, Blu-ray and DVD combo pack. This is a riot. If you like Guardians of the Galaxy, which we will be talking about today as well, you will thoroughly like this. This is straight up Guardians of the Galaxy anime style. It's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it means to be. It's released at exactly the right time, and it's a lot of fun. It's really a lot of fun. I didn't really understand most of what's going on here, any of the the galactic bounty hunter stuff or any of that, but you just kind of you riff on the visuals, and you're gonna have a great time. Record of Lodos War, OVA and Chronicles of the Heroic Knight. Lodos War has a long and treasured heritage in anime. It's some of the best the best animation you will ever see in anime, and it is again very kind of medieval, very not the Japanese medieval, but kind of more European medieval, kind of between culture medieval, and a lot of magic, sorcery, and magic. It's really fun. And of course, OVA, for those who don't know, whenever you see OVA on animation on an anime set, it means it has episodes that were not aired on television. OVA is exclusive to the disc. So this is the Record of Lodos War, Chronicles of the Heroic Knight, and the OVA episodes. Getting down here to the bottom, not so funny is Kumamiko, Girl Meets Bear, the complete series. This is one of those weirdly, kind of strangely, very culturally specific things that I just don't get.
As opposed to non-weird anime?
Well, but it's like, there are things in anime where you figure, I need to have lived at the foot of Mount Fuji for the last 30 years to understand this. I just do. Every culture has those things, and this is one of those. There's a little girl who has lived in this village, a very kind of backward village, and when the time comes that she wants to go to school, the problem is she can't bring her pet bear. She's got a pet bear. A little girl in the village with a pet bear. I mean, there's the bear. It's a bear. She has a pet bear. I don't get it. I don't really understand.
Does Cesar Millan deal with bears?
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so it's a girl and her bear. It's like Flipper or Gentle Ben.
Gentle Ben, there you go.
Gentle Ben, which I don't think anybody outside the United States appreciates either. Hyouka Part 1. More schoolgirl stuff. Boys and girls in school. Don't get it. It's all high school. And they just want to, this time they want to try to save the literature club. Well animated, interesting story in some ways, because it winds up taking some bizarre twists and turns that you don't see coming if you can kind of hang with it. But otherwise, and it has an extra OVA episode as well, but otherwise it's just strictly for people that like that genre, I gotta tell you. Strictly for that genre. And then Mamoru Hosoda, one of the great legends in anime, has put his name on Funimation's The Hosoda Collection. So they are now branding all of his stuff. And one of those has been, this is one of the more recent ones from a couple of years ago, that made the festival run and did very, very well. It's called The Boy and the Beast. This is like the bear thing, except not as nice. This is, a little bit more of a mythical world, and there are animals and beasts that are kind of Planet of the Apes-ish. Yeah, thank you. And it's kind of violent and a little bit disturbing in some respects, but otherwise beautifully done. If you know Hosoda's work, you know that it is meticulously animated. And then right down here, we're going to get down and go through some of these fairly quickly so we can get to the real juicy stuff. We have a bunch from Sentai and Section 23. One of them is Food Wars, the first season, which is more high school stuff. but it's like Iron Chef and high school, and it's coming of age, and as a chef, it's again I suspect that in a culture where like France or Japan, where eating and preparing food is a big deal, it probably means a lot more. We got some Gundam stuff. The Gundam stuff always, you have to have been part of this world from the very very beginning, or you're going to miss it. Every part of Gundam just wraps back with every other part of Gundam. Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin Chronicle of Char and Sayla is actually really really good. If you are caught up on all of your Gundam, this is really really some of the best animated stuff you're going to see. It's really from a design standpoint very impressive. Likewise is Mobile Suit Gundam MS Igloo, which is just super cool, and this is like a photorealistic animation, completely done, CGI. It's not traditional anime animation. But it's very very impressive in that respect. It's really really cool. And then lastly, much more traditional is Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt December Sky, which is part of the Sunrise series from Right Stuff. So all that is very, very cool. And then a complete collection of Gate, also from Sentai. This is 24 episodes of an absolutely crazy, wild show that is just, it's all hyperactive fantasy, and it's like an alternate Japanese universe, kind of. And it's all about the Japan's self-defense force and their efforts to sort of keep all this otherworldly these otherworldly threats at bay. And then lastly, Nadim, you've heard of Sailor Moon, right?
No, I haven't. And
Okay.
Are we going to get tested on all of this?
No,
later?
no. Just know that for men who like anime, Sailor Moon is kind of like it's like the Spice Girls of anime. That's all you need to know. Sailor Moon, there they are.
Very nice.
Yeah, very nice, right? Mini skirts and the whole thing. Sailor Moon S, Blu-ray and DVD combo pack. This is from Viz, the good people at Viz, another primo anime distribution company. And, these girls are just absolutely adorable. I don't really care what the plot is. I just absolutely enjoy all of these little kind of fantasy pixie girls. They're some of the most iconic figures in anime, and it's a lot of fun. So this is Sailor Moon S, Blu-ray and DVD combo pack.
Do they have Godzilla anime?
There's animated Godzilla from the U.S. I am unfamiliar with any anime Godzilla. Isn't that interesting? You remember there was a Saturday morning Godzilla cartoon. Did you ever see that?
No, I remember I was growing up chasing wildebeest in Africa. So
they didn't have the Godzilla cartoon?
No, we had one channel.
Oh, okay.
In Liberia. I was in Liberia, and Bonanza used to come on. That's what I remember, yeah.
Oh, all right, okay.
Okay, no Godzilla.
Well, anyway, so we've got, before we get into the interview with Terry, we've got new movies, a whole bunch of new movies. I'm going to leave some of the higher profile stuff for a little bit later. I want to start off mentioning a movie called Wakefield, which is really interesting. This is a Bryan Cranston movie. Jennifer Garner and Bryan Cranston. And this is written and directed by Robin Swycord. Robin Swycord, of course, is the tremendous screenwriter of such movies as Little Women and a lot of other great stuff, who was also married to Nicholas Kazan, also a tremendous screenwriter and director in his own right. And they are the parents of Zoe Kazan. And Nicholas Kazan, of course, is Elia Kazan's son. So, Robin Swycord is part of a kind of Hollywood royal family. And this is based on an E.L. Doctorow short story. And it's a really, really interesting movie that did no business at the box office. And that's why I want to encourage people to see this on Blu-ray or in some other form. It's a really cool Hitchcockian thriller, kind of in the Rear Window vein. But it's also a preposterous premise that requires very delicate handling in order to make it believable. And here's what it is. So Bryan Cranston is a guy who there's been a delay in the commuter train, in the subway, and he's coming back from his high-powered job late one night, and doesn't want to disturb his family. Jennifer Garner's his wife. Doesn't want to disturb the kids. So he just kind of holes up in the little space above their garage until the morning comes. And then he kind of gets this twisted idea because he's watching his family from the space above the garage. And he thinks, I'm just going to see how they react if they think that I haven't come home. So it's kind of sadistic. What if they think I'm gone? What if they think something's happened to me? What do they do? And this becomes, and he narrates this himself. You're inside his head, and this becomes almost a game to him. And he just lives there for months and watches as they panic, as the police come, as they assume that he's dead, as their lives literally change. He's up there living like a vagrant. He becomes literally a homeless person in his own life, watching the consequences of this game where he is trying to convince his family. He wants to see what happens. And you learn a lot about the background of the family and troubles in the marriage and this stuff. It's really an intriguing thing. And even as preposterous as it is, he sells it. Cranston's an amazing actor.
He's really good. I happen to know Bryan Cranston. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
He's a friend of a dear friend of mine. And everything he does really, really well. His movies just for some reason are not that popular.
I guess it's because once you've seen somebody do so much work on TV, sometimes
could be,
you know, sometimes you just don't know, you feel like, why should I pay to see this guy? I've been watching him for the last 8 years or whatever.
And especially when he's done it so well on television.
Yeah. Well, I'm just happy that he's finally got a film career going because he's so deserved it for so long. So, really a very, very interesting movie. So that movie is called Wakefield with Bryan Cranston and Jennifer Garner. Very well done. Bravo to Robin Swycord. And it's on Blu-ray. Not much by way of extras, but doesn't really need it. So it's worth checking out. Nadim, did you see Guardians?
I did.
What'd you think?
It was okay.
compared to the first one.
Again, I think the first one to me was better just because it was new.
Yeah, see, that's what I was going to say.
The second one, okay, so now I expect these guys to be even newer, and they sort of weren't.
They tried to do that by making Groot a baby Groot. Right,
yeah.
And which is cute. It's a fun little, what was used to be I am Groot is now I am Groot, and it's but it wasn't enough.
Did you grow up with the comics or
no.
anything of that sort?
It was not a Marvel comic I was ever familiar with or interested in.
Yeah, see, I didn't at all. So watching the movie was the first time I ever heard of it.
I have to believe that for most people, what drove them to this is not familiarity with it, but just trust in the Marvel brand.
Yeah, could be.
I think.
Although they sold it as if it was to go out to half the world, which should know what the Guardians of the Galaxy was.
Yeah. Well, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, it's out in 4K. James Gunn is a lot of fun. I mean, we've talked about some of his older films here before. He's a guy who really applied his trade making low-budget movies for a very, very long time. And he has a wonderful audio commentary here, which you got to go to the Blu-ray to get the audio commentary. But there's a lot of fun stuff on the 4K. Very, very sharp. But there's just not enough room for some of the extras. So they got the Blu-ray where you can watch the movie with the commentary, and there's deleted scenes and a gag reel and stuff like that. But one of these days, I guess we'll be able to get proper extras on a 4K disc. But in any case, you got them both here, and it's fun. It's just not as fresh. Are you getting a little tired of how long this is all being dragged out with the Infinity Gauntlet? You're not even following that part of the story. See, this is what I'm wondering too.
You've just thrown me down the gauntlet.
Okay, so here's the deal. In the Marvel world, there's a thing called the Infinity Gauntlet. And the Infinity Gauntlet is there are all of these gems. And when you get each of the gems and you put them into the gauntlet, then you have the power to control the universe, to jump between all of these alternate universes. It's like the ultimate power. And Thanos, who is the figure that I think they showed him just a little bit at the end of the first Avengers movie. He was in the tag at the end, kind of a crusty-faced galactic demon guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's his whole thing, is he wants to get all of the gems and put them together in the Infinity Gauntlet so that he can control the universe. So that's why you have all of these movies, Thor and the Avengers and Doctor Strange. There's always like a little gemmy jewel thing somewhere that is part of the whole deal. And they are all going to be eventually be assembled. I'm assuming when we get to Infinity War, the next two-part Avengers thing, that's where we finally have to deal with Thanos, because he's been assembling over the last 6 or 7 years all the gems for the Infinity Gauntlet. I just don't know how many people know that that's what we've been doing. And by the time we get there, I think a lot of people will be thinking, I don't remember half the movies that I need to remember to know where we're picking up this story.
I completely agree, because I had no clue what you were talking about now.
That's where it's all been going.
I just keep, eventually I start seeing things like in the Thor movie where he's crossing the bridge to the place where you get transferred to another galaxy, or another. But he goes there on a horse. What's up with that?
I don't know.
You got to ride a horse to go to somewhere. You're gonna get transported to a different dimension.
Yeah.
Can't you just be transported to a different dimension instead of having to ride a horse to get there?
I don't know. I am looking forward to the new Thor film, though, just because. But you know what? Here's something funny.
Now I'm going to be looking for a gem.
Look for the gems. Always about the gems. The new Thor film, which I'm very looking forward to, because it really ties into the comics in a cool way, and Kate Blanchett and the whole thing. And it has Jeff Goldblum, which is great. It looks very Guardians of the Galaxy. Someone on our Facebook page saw the trailer and said they poured a little Guardians of the Galaxy on my Thor. I thought that was a perfect way of putting it. He fights Hulk in that gladiatorial thing. You've seen the trailer, right?
I have not.
Actually. Oh, you haven't? Oh, it's fantastic. But what's interesting is I've just been catching up on the 3rd season of The Flash on Netflix. And there's an episode there, one of their filler episodes, where Flash gets transported to Earth 2 or 3 or whichever one it is, and is lured there by Grodd, the psychic gorilla who is now living in Gorilla City. And I kid you not, Flash fighting this giant gorilla in a gladiatorial stadium looks exactly like Thor and Hulk in the trailer. And I'm thinking somebody's ripped somebody else off here. It's too convenient. A couple other quick new ones here. Dan Stevens, hardest working man in Hollywood, because he's trying to turn that Downton Abbey cred into 150 roles a year. This guy is not stopping. He's just accelerating. Dan Stevens is working like crazy and doing the weirdest parts. He's taking everything and anything, and I don't know if it's wise, but he's certainly mixing it up, and he's turning into a really interesting actor. Not a very good movie. It's called Kill Switch. I don't believe this even made it to theaters, by the way, but it's it's kind of a cyberpunky, futuristic, wannabe Verhoeven movie. It's got a very kind of Total Recall vibe to it. It's convoluted and respectably well done, I guess. Directed by Tim Smith, who does audio commentary, but really the only reason to watch is Dan Stevens. Cop and a Half. I don't know how this became a franchise, but if you ever saw the original Cop and a Half, they've invented a whole new Cop and a Half. It was originally a Michael Keaton thing, wasn't it? Cop and a Half?
Don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it was Michael Keaton, I'm sure. Anyway, Cop and a Half is a new one with Lou Diamond Phillips and some girl named Lulu Wilson. It's called Cop and a Half: New Recruit.
Did that come out in the theaters?
This? No. Oh. The original Cop and a Half is like 15 years old. That's what that's what's mystifying to me, is like, okay, so
he could be a cop and 3/4 by now.
It's 2.5 Men. That's maybe what inspired it. Anyway, Lou Diamond Phillips, fine actor, but deserves better than this. Maybe this is all he's offered now. But anyway,
I haven't seen him in anything for ages.
I know, a very long time. Yeah, very long time. I mean, it's a guy and a kid. You know, it's like a girl and a dog, or a boy and a horse. It's a genre, and all about a boy, right? I mean, there's a million of them. So anyway, Diary of a Wimpy Kid: Long Haul. You ever seen any of these?
I have not, but they are.
They're terrible. They're terrible. This is a Blu-ray DVD combo set for Diary of a Wimpy Kid. They went and made another one. I'm not quite sure why. They're kind of all the same. This one's really more of the same. Bunch of extras on here, mostly EPK type stuff, bloopers and deleted this and that and whatever. You know what? I mean, if you saw the first one and this is your thing, knock yourselves out. All right, Nadim, let's talk about Alien for a moment.
All right.
I know you're a big fan of the series.
Yes.
Not this movie. No, okay. Thoughts as to why we seem to have run aground with the Alien franchise?
Well, for me, it ran aground maybe in the previous one. The exciting thing
Prometheus.
Yes.
Yeah.
The exciting thing about Alien was discovering the creature.
Right.
And that's what made the very first Alien so wonderful.
Yeah.
Is, you would get some slime here and there, you would get this, but you really didn't. It was anticipation of the creature that made the movie good, where in this latest one, it's right there.
Now, let me ask you this, too, because I should point out, too, Prometheus, to go along with this, Alien Covenant comes out this week on 4K. And Blu-ray, obviously, but 4K. They're really pumping the 4K, and they really want this to kind of ride. And to do that, they've also come out with Prometheus. They've re-released Prometheus this week on 4K. So the whole this new relaunch, it's not really a reboot. It's a new thread. It's a new way of approaching the Alien series with Ridley Scott coming back. Here are my issues. Tell me if you agree. I don't think even the original Alien
succeeded.
I agree.
Okay, no.
The original Alien succeeded because it built anticipation two different ways. It built it first in the marketing and then in the movie itself. So they're already arousing your suspicion with that trailer. And if you've never seen the trailer, do you remember the original trailer?
I do.
It was incredible. It's one of the great trailers of all time because it ends and you see nothing, and all you know is something horrible is happening, and then they give you that it's all quiet, that in space no one can hear you scream, and then of course the ads were just the egg and the tagline. It's cryptic, and it was genius. And then there's the word alien. You filled in, and then the movie really milked it for a long time. Didn't scratch the itch. I think all of that anticipation is gone.
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah. It's
yeah.
And I think, obviously, being marketed that way, if there wasn't a payoff in the original one, you probably would not have enjoyed the movie. But
very true.
So it was there. It just kept you dangling with a little bit of slime here, and a little bit of this there.
Yeah.
And eventually, you got to see this.
Well, does it feel like Ridley Scott has? I mean, he's almost 80 now.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
up there.
He didn't start directing films till he was in his 40s. But does it feel like he's lost his touch, lost his interest? Why, or is he just resting on his laurels? Is he too old? I can't quite figure out what it is.
I think it could be all of the above.
Yeah.
And also the pressure of the financial pressure. Not that he has any financial pressure, but I'm just saying that the idea that these movies are going to make a lot of money, and no, you can't drop it. You have to make another one.
True. Do you think CGI makes some things too easy?
I think it makes a decision easier.
Yeah.
In other words, you had to think twice 20 years ago if you wanted to put this film out, because it would have been so costly and maybe the technology wasn't quite there. But now that it's there, with some of the technology available on your laptop,
yeah, that's true.
It's a lot easier to say, yeah, let's do another one. Why not?
Crazy. Isn't it amazing you can do stuff on your laptop that used to take entire sound stages and armies of studio technicians to do in the 1940s? It's crazy.
Well, I mean, just things like saying you have enough computing power in your smartphone than what they sent
to the moon. I know. Crazy. Well, anyway, Alien Covenant, I don't think it's a bad movie. It just feels like...
Did you find it too preachy? For what
Yeah,
it's supposed to be, an alien movie.
yeah. I find most movies too preachy these days, but I also think the I think the metaphor is different now. The original Alien was an interesting moment because it was the end of the 1970s. And this gets back to when I taught film history. I always talked about the context of a film. You can't just always evaluate a film as a film. You look at a lot of these movies in their historical context. And 1979 was really interesting because it was the moment it came right. It sort of everything began. Exploitation movies began going mainstream with The Exorcist. The Exorcist was the first major studio movie that took something that previously would have been a cheesy drive-in movie and made it mainstream. Jaws blew it up, and then Star Wars and Close Encounters mainstreamed it like nobody's business. So by the time you get to Alien, well, that's basically still an exploitation film, but it's harder, it's rougher, it's beyond Star Wars, it's gritty, and it wound up almost being a metaphor for all of the fears that had bundled up throughout the 1970s with, Watergate and Vietnam and the recession. And this is literally the tail end of the Carter years. And there are gas lines, and there's a
Cold
lot of
War.
yeah, the Cold War. There's a lot of anxiety in 1979. I mean, I remember that really well. There's a lot of anxiety and a lot of economic anxiety, and especially, and I think our anxiety today is different. I don't think you can analogize it to an alien film. So they're trying to sort of the preachiness of it. I think is part of trying to project a new meaning onto it that it's not suited for. If that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah. Anyway, let's see what else we got here. The Exception. Oh, that's The Exception. I'd forgotten about this. Did you see this?
No.
Okay. So I slipped this in today, like a couple of weeks ago, and I'd forgotten that I'd even seen the movie. So here's the deal with The Exception. Christopher Plummer's great in this. This is a story I'd never even known. With Nazis being all in the news again lately, perfect film to talk about. So Kaiser Wilhelm of World War I fame. People often wonder. I think everybody kind of forgets. Well, World War I ended and he was deposed, and the Weimar Republic came in. What happened to him? Well, he basically went into exile. And he was still alive when Hitler rose to power on the eve of World War II. And there were some interesting political machinations going on because a lot of the people in the Nazi hierarchy wanted to put Kaiser Wilhelm back on the throne. Others did not. There was an interesting little and truly the people around him thought that the first thing that Hitler would do is bring the Kaiser back, right? Because he's the rightful monarch of, and that's not at all what happened. Wanted to use him, and there's a whole fascinating kind of espionage subplot here with Lily James, who's very good in this. And
is this a docudrama?
It's
or
not.
Is
It's a thriller. It's a straight up World War II era thriller.
But is it based on truth or
it
just
is
simply...
based a little bit on truth.
Okay.
I don't think the Lily Taylor character, who is this, who's a Jewish maid that is working with the resistance to try and potentially assassinate Kaiser Wilhelm, and there's a whole interesting thing there. I don't think that's necessarily factual, but it's very, very interesting on balance the way that they put all this together. So even though I think a lot of it really stretches credibility, I thought it was on balance pretty well done, and Christopher Plummer is perfect casting as Kaiser Wilhelm. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Let's talk about why they keep making King Arthur movies for a moment. Could we shoot that in the foot? Excalibur, your
Yes.
favorite? Your favorite, like it is mine?
Yes, of all of them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So why do people keep making them?
I don't know. I happened to put this on late night, hoping that I could stay awake. I kept falling asleep, and the battle sequences kept getting me out of my stupor.
Well, I mean, Guy Ritchie is not. This is King Arthur: Legend of the Sword, which is out on Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray. I'm gonna make a suggestion too, that Charlie Hunnam is just not a feature actor. He just isn't. I don't think he's got the persona or the gravitas or the appeal to be a feature movie actor.
I have a bit of an issue with the more recent Guy Ritchie movies.
Yeah,
Um,
including the Sherlock Holmes stuff.
yes.
Yeah,
Um, you know, if you can't sell me a movie by saying Sherlock Holmes and you have to say it's a Guy Ritchie movie,
mm,
then there's something wrong there.
yeah,
And this Guy Ritchie-ness of making classic stories with this directing technique that he uses just doesn't cut it for me because it takes away from the story.
Well, he has a very inflexible style. It's his style. It works for things like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and
Snatch.
Snatch and
Snatch was great.
and Rock and Rolla.
Yeah.
I mean, and when he's doing his own material, but they keep wanting to kind of borrow him as a brand and pair him with other brands. And it never works.
I mean, for me, his style doesn't work in historical films. It's just too slick.
Yeah.
You take me out. I didn't feel I was in Excalibur days.
No.
I didn't feel I was in Sherlock Holmes days when
No.
I've seen Sherlock Holmes. It takes you completely out of the element.
Yeah, it does.
So,
It does. Well, anyway, you know, it's just it doesn't.
It's out on 8K.
Yeah, it was next year. Bunch of extras in here. Jude Law is maybe the best thing about this, but even he just feels like he's 10 years too old for what he's trying to do here. It's a really lackluster King Arthur and not well told. I have a particular problem, by the way, with Guy Ritchie's Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I just think is boring beyond belief. It's amazing to me how misbegotten that movie is.
Did not see it.
Oh, it's just so bad. And then the last two, real quickly. There's this book, Everything. They sent us the book. You ever heard of the book?
No.
There's the book. They sent us the book along with the Blu-ray.
Now a major motion picture.
Yeah, and I hadn't even heard of the movie, so this is clearly bonked. It comes to us from Warner Brothers. Almost no extras here. Everything is it kind of, you know, it comes on the heels of a lot of these other movies now. We have a lot of interracial love stories. I think the Obama presidency and the having a biracial president, and then of course Tiger Woods and a lot of other, you know, celebrities who come from mixed race backgrounds has sort of given the culture permission to consider these things in movies now. The Flash has a lot of, you know, Flash just sort of ignores race completely. So then we had things like Loving. And the one with David Oyelowo is the African Prince, and you know, a lot of these. So this is a thing now, apparently, that everybody kind of feels they have a license to do, and that's what this is. This is a mixed race romance, young romance thing, and it's okay. I think it's one of those young adult novels that probably has a higher following among people who are half my age. But
the book has pictures from the movie.
Yeah, that's a little cheesy.
And they're pictures of the two people.
Yeah,
in every shot.
It is. It's schmaltzy. And then before we get into some classic movies or some foreign films, we got both over here. We'll see how many we can get through. I just want to say this is everything that's wrong with studios in a nutshell. Snatched. Everything. Snatched is an absolutely stillborn comedy with Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn as mother and daughter. And this is basically, somebody said, why don't we remake Ruthless People, except we'll do it with Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn. It's not funny. How do you put Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn in a movie and it's not funny? How does that?
Something's wrong.
Something's so wrong. It's unbelievable. Jonathan Levine is the director.
Did it do well?
No, it made no money. The thing crashed and burned right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Nobody went to see it.
Hey, to the audience for once.
Yeah, right. By the way, this summer, what do you think of that statistic? This is the lowest grossing summer, the worst box office performing summer. I don't think lowest grossing, but fewest tickets sold certainly in 25 years.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. This is the one that Spielberg and Lucas warned about, where there were so many expensive tent poles that they just all pulled each other down like a line of dominoes.
Yeah, there are other factors too. Netflix, that
Yeah.
sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
People rather stay home.
Yeah.
Popcorn prices.
Yeah, for sure. I just started watching Defenders. You seen the Defenders?
No.
You even following this?
No.
Did you watch Daredevil?
No.
Did you watch Luke Cage? No.
No.
Did you watch Jessica Jones? Of course not. No. Well, yeah, you better not have watched.
But I swam with sharks. Played with.
No, this is recent. Last few years. No, the Defenders. This is the TV version, Marvel's TV thing, like what they're doing in the movies. So they start off with 2 seasons of Daredevil, 1 season of Luke Cage, 1 season of Jessica Jones, 1 season of Iron Fist, and now they all come together to fight Sigourney Weaver.
No. You know, it's very interesting. I worked in television, but
you don't watch any.
I never really am into serials.
Yeah.
I don't like to be told, come back next week if you want to know what happens.
Yeah, it's addicting, unfortunately. Anyway, Snatched. Boo. All right, let's go into some classic movies here. Nadim, is there anything that jumps out at you that is highly recommended to people?
Whale Rider.
Yeah, right?
I think that's a great movie.
It is a great movie.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's a terrific movie. Whale Rider is out on a 15th anniversary Blu-ray edition. Nikki Caro's absolutely wonderful, wonderful movie is part of the Shout Select line. Shout's giving kind of the royal treatment to quote-unquote select films. And this is a New Zealand film, coming of age. The young actress in this thing is just absolutely tremendous.
She won an Oscar, no?
She was nominated. Keisha Castle Hughes.
Right, she was nominated.
Yeah, she was nominated for an Oscar, and she's just absolutely wonderful.
Terrific in this movie.
What's so interesting to me is the modern tribal dynamic. You know, I find Maori culture really, really interesting. You've known some Maoris too, haven't you?
Have I what?
You've known some Maoris.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's I knew a Maori.
It's wonderful with homos.
Yeah. No, I knew a Maori guy here for a little while who was teaching a bunch of us how to play rugby. It was an awful lot of fun.
I'm sure he schooled you.
Oh yeah, no. Well, it's funny when you have a bunch of fairly uncoordinated bunch of white guys who really badly want to learn rugby. And you have a Maori guy who very patiently is sort of dealing with all of you. What becomes really clear is that these are guys who sit in cubicles and behind computers all week. And a Maori guy wants to teach you rugby, you feel like, I am young and I am rough. And you start having these delusions of yourself, entering a new phase of life. It's like a midlife crisis. You want to buy a motorcycle jacket and a motorcycle. But yeah, I do love the Maori culture. There's so much that's so fascinating to me about it. And what I love about this movie is the way that it sort of introduces you to the way that a lot of those traditions and customs have mutated in the modern age and how they don't fit so comfortably.
Yes, but on the flip side of the coin, it has more than other cultures like the Aborigines in Australia, which are completely. I mean, the Maoris are actually part of New Zealand.
Yeah.
The Aborigines, they have a contract. I mean, they were dealt with a contract, and they're very much a part, including now the flag of New Zealand is about to change.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, and they've. It seems the one that's most in the running is a black flag with a white fern, which is similar to the design on the rugby players, all blacks.
Oh,
all blacks.
That's great.
But the flag is reverting to Maori symbols, which is very much part of New Zealand.
Is it going to lose the Union Jack?
Yes.
So they're following what Canada did back in whenever it was 70 something when it went maple leaf. That's interesting.
Yeah. So there's been some funny designs. They had a competition, and there are 3 that it was pretty interesting. But I think that a Whale Rider was way ahead of its time in making bringing to light girls and women.
Yeah.
What Wonder Woman is recently. This is a Wonder Woman of, what is it, 15, 20 years ago? When did it come out?
Yeah.
But based in reality.
15th anniversary, 15 years.
Yeah, there's some spiritual aspect to the movie, but I think it's great.
Well, fantastic movie. We both love it. Based on a novel by Witi Ihmira. I'm I'm sorry to all of the Kiwi people who listen to this podcast for not knowing how to pronounce that. Nikita wrote and directed the film beautifully, absolutely beautifully, and this is the first time it's ever been on Blu-ray from Shot Select. We absolutely love it. Shakes the Clown is also out. Does that warrant any discussion?
I don't know it.
Shakes the Clown. You never saw Shakes the Clown?
No.
It's the what's the great quote? I wonder if they even have it here. Yeah, there it is. Betsy Sherman. This is the only decent pull quote this movie's ever had. They've lived off of it for 20 years or whatever. Seriously, 1991 is 26 years. The Citizen Kane of alcoholic clown movies. It's one of the best pull quotes I've ever seen. The Citizen Kane of alcoholic clown movies. But you know what? Bobcat Goldthwait has gone on to be quite the acidic auteur. He's gone on to make some really twisted movies that all have something to say, and I don't think anybody really expected that. He wrote and directed this, and a lot of people have kind of had to revisit it and give him some more credit for what he was doing here. Shakes the Clown is not a particularly good movie. He's trying to work something out, but it has some stuff in it, To take Florence Henderson, for example, one of the first things in the movie, one of the first bits is that it takes place in a world where every guy's a clown, okay? And one of the first bits in the movie is he has just had a wild night with Florence Henderson, who looks like somebody just went over her with, a bulldozer. And he wakes up with, I'm sorry to be so gross, but it's in the movie. He wakes up with his head next to a toilet as her son is urinating on the toilet and isn't quite as accurate as you might expect. This is one of the first bits in the movie. Now, if you manage to get through that without walking out, you are then treated to gang fights with mimes and all kinds of other stuff that's just very bizarre. But you know what? I think revisiting it, people will discover that there's a lot more going on. So that's on Blu-ray now. Let me hit a couple of these things. Punchline with Sally Field and Tom Hanks. Also out on Blu-ray from Mill Creek. I think this is a better film than people gave it credit for at the time. David Seltzer wrote and directed this. It is, a lot of people kind of thought, this was Tom Hanks, throwing a bone to Sally Field, and Sally Field trying to do something that she shouldn't have done as a woman trying to learn, the ropes of stand-up comedy. But it actually has more to say about stand-up comedy than I think a lot of people gave it credit for. John Wayne, double feature. This is from Paramount and CBS. This is Rio Lobo and Big Jake. I don't think either one is a particularly great film, but they're both kind of classic John Wayne movies. Fans are particularly fond of both of them, even if critics aren't. And it's what do you want? Rio Lobo and Big Jake on Blu-ray. Blackbeard, who's been in the movies quite a bit of late, including the one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. A legendary figure, never been done quite right. This film doesn't quite do it either. This is from 2005, directed by Kevin Connor, starring Angus McFadden, who was a bigger deal 15, 20 years ago than he is now. Richard Chamberlain, Stacy Keach, a lot of people show up in this. Jessica Chastain. It's okay. It's adequate if you're into pirates and you like watch Black Sails or whatever.
We need Guy Ritchie to do Blackbeard.
Oh no, please no. Seriously no. John Travolta and Scarlett Johansson in A Love Song for Bobby Long, which is also out now from Mill Creek. This is only on DVD, not on Blu-ray. A little bit saccharine, but if you like the 2 stars, it's a film worth rediscovering. Let's talk for a second here. We've got some Criterions before I launch us into the interview with Terry. Sid and Nancy. Criterion Blu-ray.
Wow.
Does it hold up?
Does it?
Does it?
I don't know.
I think it does. I think it holds up really well. Mark and I had been talking of late about you've seen the Churchill trailer, Gary Oldman as Churchill. Have you seen that yet?
Oh yeah.
It's amazing, right? What is the finest hour, darkest hour. It's kind of amazing, right? The makeup.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't look like Gary Oldman at all. Phenomenal.
Good thing it looks like Churchill.
Yeah. Well, he looks like Sid. I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
Who would ever have thought? Now imagine at the time of Sid and Nancy, when he's disappearing into Sid Vicious, if somebody had said to you, that guy that's playing Sid Vicious,
One day he'll
couple
play
of decades,
Churchill.
he's going to be playing Churchill. Whoever would have believed that?
Yeah.
Right? It's amazing. Sid and Nancy out in its Criterion edition, Blu-ray. Bunch of extras, as you would expect. 2 audio commentaries, including the original 1994 commentary with Abby Wool and Gary Oldman and Chloe Webb. Grill Marcus, the cultural historian, Julian Temple, and everybody shows up here. There's tons and tons of stuff here. Everything you ever needed to know about the Sex Pistols and Sid Vicious, and it's loaded up. You will learn more about punk just from the extras here. It's phenomenal. Also, this is a 4K digital transfer restoration, which leads me to believe that it's probably not going to be too long before we see Criterion releasing 4K Blu-rays. I think that's in the offing.
They haven't yet?
Not yet. Criterion has not. So far, it's Fox and Universal. Disney hasn't even. The Guardians of the Galaxy is their first. That's their first 4K. So even Disney has not fully. They're just barely embracing 4K now. Warner Brothers has. So the major studios have. Lionsgate obviously has, but by and large, 4K is not mainstreamed yet. So I think it's interesting.
Are the clientele there for 4K?
That's a good question. I have to look at the sales figures for 4K players and TVs, see what kind of an installed base they're trying. Because part of the idea of discontinuing 3D televisions was to push for 4K televisions, to get people to now adopt 4K as their standard, because 3D clearly wasn't doing it. And anyway, Sid and Nancy, absolutely terrific. Alex Cox approved edition. And then, when you were chasing wildebeest, did you ever watch Sasha Guitry movies? I'm going to guess no. No, okay.
No. Used to end up at the drive-in watching Gone with the Wind, and mainly martial arts movies.
Okay.
Where the cheap seats at the front of the theater were foldable seats, and right after the movie, everybody thought they could do all the moves and would smash chairs and everybody. It was a wonderful experience.
I'm jealous now because I was watching
and laughter at horror movies.
Yeah, I was probably watching.
Not believe.
I was watching Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did watch Gilligan's Island. It did actually. That came on too on television.
See?
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? But Gilligan's Island made it to Africa. You had one channel
and black and white.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. First
season of Gilligan's Island was black and white. Well, Sacha Guitry, who's one of my favorite French auteurs of the he directed for a long time, but of the pre-New Wave period in particular. Sacha Guitry's movies are just light and frolicky and frothy and just jovial and absolutely wonderful. He's kind of like Vincent Minnelli in a lot of ways. He has a similar sense of life. From 1951, which is somewhat late-ish in the Sacha Guitry canon of films that are really relevant, is La Poison, or La Poison, if you want to pronounce it the way that Mark would, and
L.A. Poison.
Yeah, exactly. L.A. Poison. There you go. This is one where he worked with with actor Michel Simon, who was really a tremendous figure at the time, and it's just a really fascinating dark comedy about a completely dysfunctional marriage. And it kind of does, we talked earlier about Ruthless People. It has kind of a Ruthless People vibe, but with Sacha Guitry's sweetness. So it's dark but sweet. It's really a lot of fun. And I'm shocked that this would wind up, I guess I shouldn't be, that Criterion always surprises me with something every once in a while, but it's a lot of fun. A bunch of Kinos this week, too. I was going to try and start the show with the good, the bad, and the ugly theme, and I for some reason, I don't have it. There you go. That's really good.
You should have told me. I would have started the show for you.
I had no idea you could do that. Well, that's great. Kino has. We've got a DVD from Kino. They went and mined this out of the 20th and MGM library, and there are 3 commentaries on here, and they're all tremendous, including one of them with my late colleague Richard Schickel. Who I listen to this and I really, really miss him. He's just such a crusty curmudgeon. Mark and I don't know if we told you this. When Richard Schickel died, Mark went and dug up some old emails of his from Richard Schickel when we were having LAFCA emails going around, and how just curmudgeonly and insulting he could be, and I don't have time for this, and Mark sent an email out for soliciting advice or something for the website, and Schickel was like, "Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I don't have time." Such a funny man, and not intentionally so, but his commentary here is great. He had such a great mind for the movies. It's just wonderful, and the transfer is really good. I think they could probably still do better, but all things considered, this is probably as good as this movie is going to look. And there's kinds of stuff here on the reconstruction of it, and some great featurettes. One of them on Ennio Morricone. It's fantastic. So, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Sergio Leone. It's of the three films. Is this the best one?
I think so.
A few dollars more.
Yeah.
Fistful, yeah.
They're all good. They all have their, they all have their high points, but I like this the best.
Yeah, I do too. And then the rest of the Kinos include, real quickly, Little Nikita. Not a great movie. Sidney Poitier and River Phoenix. This is kind of a lackluster spy film directed by Richard Benjamin from kind of the tail end of his significant part of his career. This kind of should have been better, but it's more of a star vehicle just to pair those two together. Kind of a Cold War dud. Barton Fink, legendary, goes without saying, won the Palme d'Or for the Coen brothers, the first film, and likely the only film, I don't know if you know this is the only film that will ever go down as the one that won both director and picture and screenplay at Cannes.
Really?
They changed the rules. Now those three awards need to go to three different films.
Huh.
It kind of ruined the whole share the wealth custom at Cannes that they gave screenplay, director, and picture to this. And they should have known, because Roman Polanski was head of the jury that year. Now, of all the films that were in the competition that year, which one screamed Polanski? Yeah. I mean, sure, there's a jury of other people, but that was no question. And then the last two here from Kino. One is Emil Jannings, the great German actor, great German silent actor in Variété. This is from the F.W. Murnau collection of films. They're not all Murnau films, I should point out. They're just from the Murnau collection. This is directed by E.A. Dupont. Cinematographer was Karl Freund. You know about Karl Freund?
No.
Legendary German cinematographer. He shot some of the most haunting movies of the German silent period. Went on to do his best work on television on I Love Lucy.
Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah. And by the way, that's not a joke. I Love Lucy was an incredibly difficult show to shoot, because unlike three camera shows of today, it was shot on film, and those cameras had fixed lenses. So anytime you see a close-up, that means that somebody had to truck in like a mother to get in close. And if you see some of the actual ISO'd footage from those cameras, where there's focus pulling going all over the place and the camera's piling over cables, it's kind of fascinating what got cut out. So Karl Freund was a revolutionary cinematographer in television too.
Were the cameras on pedestals with I Love Lucy?
Yeah. They were with big wheels, and the whole thing is fascinating. Anyway, Variété, really, really interesting silent film. Emil Jannings is a carnival guy. It's kind of like a little bit like Sunrise, in some respects. He's a carnival worker who has this sexual obsession with another worker at the carnival, and it's really, really. It's really kind of dark and disturbing, and yet at the same time very, very aesthetically satisfying and pleasing.
English subtitles?
Yeah. And then Beggars of Life is the other one, which is also a wonderful, wonderful movie from 1928. Right in the very, very early sound end of the silent era. This one is still silent, but you can tell just stylistically that it's moving toward the sound era. It's really interesting. And now we're going to move into my interview with Terry Sanders, my very first film school instructor from many years ago, who has a new film out called Liza, Liza, Skies Are Gray, a really, really interesting movie it's a road trip set in the 1960s, and it's got a lot of interesting things to say about today and a lot of interesting things to say about then. and I do recommend it. So here, without further ado, is my interview with my old teacher and Oscar-winning filmmaker, Terry Sanders.
It is my tremendous privilege to be speaking with my very first film school instructor, who is also an Academy Award-winning filmmaker himself, Terry Sanders. Terry, thank you for taking time out. It's always great to talk to you again, and congratulations on your new film, which is a narrative film, Liza, Liza, Skies Are Gray. And what you've mainly done for most of your career are documentaries, and this is a narrative film that harkens back to a lot of stuff in the 60s that I think is really quite pertinent now, a real kind of fascinating coming-of-age road trip that has a lot of really powerful undertones to it. Talk about what led to this turn from documentaries to this particular narrative project.
I will. I have to say that I began the first 10 years of my filmmaking career was in narrative film, starting with the short story film A Time Out of War that I did with my brother Dennis. That was the first student film to win a real Oscar. That was narrative. Then we did two narrative films, the adaptation of Crime and Punishment that introduced George Hamilton, and then we did a Korean war story called War Hunt, which introduced Robert Redford. So on those, really at that time, I just briefly say that the Directors Guild didn't allow two directors' credits. So being the younger brother, I would take the producer's credit, and Dennis took the director. Anyway, but after 10 years, our partnership sort of split up, and I got into documentaries with David Wolper and did many documentaries. And but during that period, the Liza Liza, the background of that is that in the 60s, I actually read a colleague's coming-of-age story about first love, and the thought struck me, hey, I can do better than that. So I wrote the script. Basically, I wrote it in the 60s, and it was going to be made as the first film under the American Film Institute, which had been newly formed. They were going to do one film a year under their banner, and this was going to be it. And then the funding fell through. So the script sat on the shelf for 45 years.
Wow.
While I was doing documentaries. And then my filmmaking daughter, Jessica Sanders, happened to read it, and she said, hey, you should make this. And so, I reread it. I certainly liked the script. But in the meantime, it had been written in the 60s, a contemporary drama, love story. And by 2014, it was now a period piece, which made it more complicated to produce with vintage vehicles and vintage costumes and wardrobe and props and everything. But I figured out a way of doing it with a few investor friends that I had that put a little money into it. And I made it as definitely a passion project kind of film. I have to say that I grew up, my mother and father were both artists. My father was an architect designer, but also an artist. My mother was a sculptor and painter. And I was always surrounded by painters. And, when a painter wants to do a painting, they don't go out and say, maybe I can raise some money so I can do a painting. They just do it.
Right.
And that was my attitude with this was, on the way over, one side is studios and high budget independence, and way over on the other side is art films and experimental films, and this falls into that category.
I think it's so fascinating that this is a script that was written in the era that it depicts, and as you said, it's now become a period piece, which I think speaks to the authenticity of it, because it doesn't. Very often we will see films, and I won't name any, but they're never quite able to capture their era because they're looking backward at it. They're looking through a veneer of history and perspective, and you kind of you don't really feel as though they understand the period. And this one, it never feels anything less than absolutely authentic. It feels as though you really are in the moment, and that's obviously why. Did that change how you directed the actors? Was there, or was everything just very matter of fact, and we treat the material as the material, or was there any sort of discussion of that dichotomy when you were making it?
Well, the actors, of course, being born like this century.
Yeah.
They were both. One was 15 years old, Mikey Madison, and
she's
Sean
wonderful.
Scully
She's wonderful, by the way. She really is.
Yeah, she's now in a series called Better Things, which is on FX, which is starting its second season. She's great in it. But part of the authenticity is that this story had to be about very young people, 15 and 16, and so I was determined not to cast 20-year-olds as teenagers or something, the way I often see in coming-of-age films. So Mikey was just getting interested in acting. Actually, this was her very first film, and she was a natural. I mean, she just, anything that came out of her mouth, I believed. But as far as the film itself, it was written in the era that is about, and it's basically made up of fragments of my life. It's not autobiographical in a real pure sense, but in another sense, everything in it is something I either lived through or saw or whatever. And part of the attitude in making the film is a lot of films try to explain everything, and some people are I think, maybe put off a little by the film that doesn't, explain everything, leaves things to the imagination. But I that was purposeful, because in growing up, no one ever explains things to kids, why people get divorced or why this happens or that happens. I mean, you sort of live through it, and including, wars and everything else. A lot of it flies over your head. I mean, you're living it, but you don't understand it. And that's part of life. We don't really understand things that happen,
Yeah.
Look at the political situation right now. Yeah.
Wow. Well, what were the logistics like for putting this together? I mean, you're making an independent period film. Obviously, being in Southern California helps, and a lot of Southern California hasn't really changed since the 1960s. And I think you used the locations and the environments very, very well. But otherwise, what were some of the logistic challenges?
Well, the name of the game, of course, is finding locations that you didn't have to spend money or much money to change. And if you're diligent in your location scouting, you can find wonderful little pockets of time warps, And of course, the coast and the beach doesn't. I mean, the sky and the sea remains the same. But I was actually made this film as an ultra low budget film under the Screen Actors Guild ultra low budget agreement, which enabled me. It's a great agreement for if you make a theatrical film. We're not talking about TV or something. If you make a theatrical film and don't spend over $200,000, you're allowed to pay actors $100 a day, and only for the days that they work.
Right.
So the approach that was, hey, we're making an art film, and anyone who wants to join, great. We'll all get $100 a day, and if we don't want to do it, fine, don't do it. But I found wonderful people came out of the atmosphere to join in making the film, and the other thing about locations today as opposed to in the 60s, sure, there were buildings that weren't there in the 60s. And one great example is all the lines in the highways, because it's a motorcycle road trip up the Pacific Coast Highway. In the 60s, all the center lines were white, but starting in the 70s, they all were painted yellow. So with the digital cinematography and digital editing came to the rescue. Rather simply, you can change digitally all those lines from yellow to white, and you could also make buildings disappear that weren't there, and also like modern light switches on walls, you could just erase. So that was a great help.
That's terrific. I didn't even realize that you did that. That's great.
Yeah, but you know, the motorcycle. I just had. It was sort of a miracle that this film got made. Like the motorcycle itself, a '65 Triumph. A fellow named Justin Kell, who has Glory Motors in Glendale, and he's a surfer, but he supplies motorcycles and expertise to $100 million Hollywood movies like Captain America. He read the script, loved it, and he donated for the use of for the picture a '65 Triumph, and he became second unit director and stunt coordinator. And things happened like that. I had a wonderful line producer who was just fantastic, who was able to just find things and put things together. It was amazing how the crew just formed itself.
That's great. How long did you shoot for?
We were able to shoot for about 25 days on 30 locations up and down the coast, from Pacific Palisades up to Big Sur.
That's great.
And they were not long days. One of the things I wanted to do is a civilized, like European, as I've heard, European style, where you don't work over 10 hours a day, and you have a nice lunch in there somewhere. Also, sometimes we work 4-day weeks because partly having not a lot of money to have all kinds of extra crew, I needed an extra day to get organized for the shooting. So some of the weeks were 4-day weeks. Nothing was over 5-day week.
Well, that's great. Well, Terry, that brings us right about to the end of our moment here. But I would encourage people to go and see it. Liza, Skies Are Gray. To my knowledge, I can't think of any other films that were written in one decade and then filmed this long after the fact. I'm sure there may be a couple, but you're certainly in a rare class with this one. And I congratulate you again for making it and for pulling off what I think is really an incredibly touching and meaningful film, and which kind of in many ways I think is a great allegory for a lot of the disenfranchisement young people feel today as well. So thank you for your movie. Thank you for speaking with us, and best of luck with it.
And can I just give one shout out to Eric Darstead, a cinematographer who I've worked with for many, many decades.
Absolutely.
And did a fabulous job. We shot primarily also in available light, which was important to the film. But thanks a lot, Wade.
Thank you, Terry. We'll speak soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And there it is. So I urge people to go out and see that wherever you can find it. It's going to be making its way around the country. It's starting here in LA. Nadim, thank you for being with us. And there it is. All right, thank you. Nadim will be back with us next week. And everybody, have a great week as well.